I was born in a village where we were subjects to attacks on monthly basis. The government troops will come and burn down the villages, kill whoever that they will find. And when I see what happened recently in Israel, where they went and burned down and shot people, that's exactly what I experienced when I was a child.
When Simon Deng was 9 years old, he was kidnapped from South Sudan and brought to the north. He was given to an Arab family as a, quote, gift and enslaved for over 3 years.
I'm here talking to you as a living proof of the slavery which still exists.
25 years ago, Charles Jacobs helped to liberate tens of thousands of slaves in Africa and received an award from Coretta Scott King for his work. Today, Simon and Charles are co-founders of the newly formed African Jewish Alliance.
Hamas is no different than Boko Haram in Nigeria. It's one front in Israel, but it belongs to a global movement, and people need to know that.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Simon Deng, Charles Jacobs, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So Simon, let's start with you. A lot of us, Americans, Canadians, frankly people in the West, believe that slavery is something that is an issue of the past, the distant past. But you're actually kind of living proof that that's not true, that it exists today. So why don't we just start with your story?
Thank you for having me here. I'm here talking to you as a living proof of the slavery which still exists in a country of Sudan. When I was a child, I was kidnapped from my loved ones, brought to northern Sudan, and I was given away as a gift. And I was a slave in Sudan when I was 9 years old.
There's also, you're from South Sudan, which is now a separate country. What is happening there? For a lot of people, this idea is just something that they won't be able to fathom unless you give us a bit more background.
Yes, it is true, because when you talk about Sudan, we talk about a country where there is no media, there is no cameras on the ground to bring the footage, especially when you're talking about people who are so dug so far, nobody even look at them as a human being exist. A country of Sudan has been in war for so long. The Northern Sudanese was fighting the Southern Sudanese before the secession, which happened in 2011. The conflicts between the Northern Sudanese and the Southern Sudanese, it started in 1955. There was a temporary peace agreement in 1972 where the sitting government in Sudan, which is everybody thought that is a government for all peoples, but unfortunately it was a government for particular people in Sudan, Muslim in the north, Arabs in the north. Africans are irrelevant, they are not being considered. The same government who signed peace agreement with the Southerners in 1982 went and cancelled the agreement which was between them, and Sudan was declared as an Islamic state next to Iran. The first African country in the continent of Africa become an Islamic state is a country of Sudan, where now everybody was subject to the Sharia law, everybody was subject to the Islamic law, to a point where the Southern Sudanese felt that the fourth citizens of a country, because the first, in Islam, the first citizen is the Muslims, the second citizen of a country is a woman, and the third citizen of a country is another Muslim from other country. And the war broke out in 1982, which caused 2 million Southern Sudanese was perished, was a slaughter, because the jihad was declared on the infidel in Southern Sudan. It was one of the ruthless war in the world, where you have other people from other countries, they have to go volunteer to fight the infidel in the name of jihad, including people like Osama bin Laden, which the world become known. Osama bin Laden was in Khartoum, executing the policy of jihad against the infidels. The Al-Qaeda was created in Khartoum, in which that all Osama bin Laden soldiers was fighting Southern Sudanese at that time. Those who think that slavery is on the past because they don't know what is happening in Southern Sudan, because we don't have a camera there, we don't have anybody in that place. Even that a journalist, a Western journalist, for them to go into that place, they have to get a permission from a sitting government, a government who doesn't want any foreigner to see what is taking place in that country.
Now, Charles, I'm going to jump to you in just a moment because I know you can flesh this out. You've been working on this issue for almost 3 decades, I think. But can you just tell me what happened in your village?
You know, what happened in the first place, you know, I was born in a village where we were subjects to attacks on monthly basis, yearly basis. The government troops will come and burn down the villages, kill whoever that they will find. Usually we have to run to the bush, and the government will come and burn down everything, and our father will come back and then build the villages again, because to build a village you need some small thing that you can go cut some wood and build a hut. That's where we are. We are not in a city like any other places. And when I see what happened recently in Israel, where they went and burned down and shot people, that's exactly what I experienced when I was a child. And especially when somebody shooting somebody, killing somebody, and have a word in his mouth, Allahu Akbar, which is God great, that make me wonder what kind of God is this. That's exactly what I experienced as a child.
So you were captured?
My dad decided to take his family to the town, which is the capital in Malacan, which is the city. Was in a village. It was in that town where one of my neighbor at that times was leaving, going to the northern Sudan, and he asked me that to help him with his luggage. And as a child, if somebody say help me, and then I did. So he told me to sit next to his luggage in the steamers, that he's going to get something in the market. He didn't show up at the same times until the steamers leave, and I become terrified, crying. Immediately he came to calm me down, telling me that don't worry, the steamer left the station, cannot go back, so we will go all the way to the destination, a city of Kosti in northern Sudan. And he promised me that when we arrive in Kosti, he will put me there to the other steamer which coming back to southern Sudan, which was a lie. When we arrived in Kosti, we walking into the city with him, a grown-up man, a northerners, a Muslim person, with 3 African kids with him, and we didn't know ourselves. And that's how I end up in his hand, and where he went and gave me away to his relative as a gift.
So I wanted to take a quick break to tell you about something that's actually quite important to me. I've been kind of resisting getting a sponsor for the show for some time. There's been numerous offers, let's just say. Patriot Gold Group came to me, and the gold is actually something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, because we're in very volatile times, very unpredictable times. So gold is the place that I think is one of the few kind of stable places to put money. And Patriot Gold Group is a good company. We checked them out. And so I bought some gold with them. And you know, the value, and this is kind of crazy, since I bought it, I think about 3 weeks ago, of this gold has gone up by over $500. And this isn't a large amount of gold that I bought here. So let me show you what I got. So this is Rand Refinery 1 ounce fine gold bullion, the American Eagle, and 5 silver eagles. So I'm actually gonna pull out the gold eagle for you because it looks kind of awesome. Wow, it's got an amazing weight to it. So if you're inspired to buy some gold, I recommend you call Patriot Gold Group. You can call them at 888-857-0495, 888-857-0495. Mention American Thought Leaders. With that, let's head back to the interview. The last part of the story is, how is it that you managed to get out? I understand it was about 4 years that you were in.
3.5 years.
Okay.
What happened was that in the city of Fashishoya in the northern Sudan, my slave master family, they have a son which need to go to the junior high schools. In that village of Fashishoya in northern Sudan, there is no junior high school, so they have to move to Kosti. It was in Kosti when one day I saw the 3 Shilluk gentlemen with the Shilluk tribal marks in their first, like what I have today. I didn't have those tribal marks at that time. In fact, during my duration as an enslaved, I was even given an options by my slave master that if I want to be treated like a human being, I have to take the offer that on the table, which is convert to Islam, given Arab names, and become their son, which I was willing to convert to Islam if that will save me from what I go through every day. And I was willing even to take the Arab names if that will make me to be treated like a human being. But the third one, it was very difficult to take, that to become their son. In my mind, even that I was a child, I have a mom who loved me so dearly, and I have a dad. I have a wonderful family. I was kidnapped against my will. Nobody knows what happened to me. Now, how can I give away my identity? During that times, there is one word that I know. Yes, and yes, and yes to everything. I cannot say no to anything, everything, even to the torture, that I have to say yes to it. So what I always tell them that, yes, I will let you know. I will let you know. I'm buying times because I'm relying on 2 things, hope and faith, that one day somebody will come and say that a child should not go through what I went through. And that hope and faith came when their son have to go to the junior high school. So it was in city of Kosti when I saw the 3 gentlemen with the Shilluk tribal marks. This is what I has been waiting for. So I went to them with so happiness in my face because of the tribal mark they have in their forehead, and I didn't have one. So all I have is to communicate with them in the Shilluk language. And then, unfortunately, one of them said to me that they come from northern Shilluks, and I come from southern Shilluks, in which that they don't know my mom, my dad, because all I have to do, tell them my mom name, my dad name, and my village name. I just assume that they know. When he said that, without me realizing, the tears was running down in my face. I got disappointed. And then the other person came and put his hand on me, telling me that, don't cry. The only thing that we don't know your mom, but there is somebody that we know who came from the village that you mentioned. So we will go to that person. Tomorrow we will come and we will meet you in this place. And indeed, I was there before them, and here they come. I couldn't believe what I saw. Somebody that I knew from the village. And that individual himself broke down in tears crying. For 2.5 years, my dad was looking for me. My dad has put an offer 10 cow to whoever that will come and tell him about his son. 2.5 years passed by. Nobody came to claim 10 cows. So my parents went and put the funeral of their lost child and that child together. And that's why he was crying. So he told me that I should not inform my slave master that I met somebody that I know, because he was afraid that I will be taken to a place where I will not be found. And indeed, I kept that promise. He was the one who rescued me and took me out from the slavery. Without him, I wouldn't be here with you today as a free man talking to you in a free country, which is the United States.
What an unbelievable story. And Charles, you know, you've been busy in your life helping to liberate some of these slaves from the region. I mean, I think you've even gotten an award from Coretta Scott King for doing so. And this has been going on for decades. How does this even happen? Is this like what we think of as slavery here in North America?
Well, I first found out about this on an airplane. I had a job out of college. I was a management consultant. I was flying from city to city, and I was just reading. This is before smartphones. You know, when you got on an airplane, they gave you magazines. I was reading in Newsweek, I think it was, that you could buy and sell a black woman for $30 in Sudan and in other places. I said, what? I couldn't believe that in my own time, I thought slavery was history, like we all thought. This article was on page 19. Now, why was an article that said I could buy and sell black people on page 19? And that got me thinking about what really is going on in the American mind that won't let certain realities come true. And my research led me to see that there was slavery in Sudan, there was slavery in Mauritania, there was slavery in lots of other places, but the human rights groups didn't seem to put that on their front. They had these reports in the back of their file cabinets. You know, there was no march on Washington to free the slaves. Yet, there were marches in Washington to stop apartheid in South Africa. Well, apartheid's terrible. I went on those marches. What stopped the human rights community and the media from not caring about people like Simon?
I remember sitting down with one of the bishops of Sudan, the person who is being exiled in Sudan, a bishop being thrown out because he talked against the slavery in a country, Bishop Makram.
So I started the American Anti-Slavery Group. And you know, I got a lot of interest from decent people. I wrote a piece in the New York Times that broke the story about the slavery in Mauritania and Sudan. And I started to build an organization.
On behalf of a people most Americans had thought long ago vanished, black chattel slaves. I am Charles Jacobs, the research director of the American Anti-Slavery Group, an organization of American and African abolitionists, black and white, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, who have for 3 years endeavored to place the issue of the present-day slave trade and black slaves on America's national agenda.
This is America. We tore this country apart over the issue of one man owning another, and this is New York. This is the gateway to freedom where millions of Americans escape tyranny and despotism and kinds of slavery.
Sudan must be evicted from the United Nations. You can't have a slaughterer and enslaver of people sit in the United Nations.
And we got the NAACP, we got all kinds of Eleanor Holmes Norton, important black congressmen. We got people really concerned about this. So you had this Arab Islamic regime, extremist regime, declared a jihad against the black Christian South. And militias would storm African villages. They would shoot the men, because this is not the kind of slavery in the sense that we had, because you don't need musculature. They didn't get them because they wanted to do rice harvest or cotton picking. This was all for concubinage and humiliation and spreading their culture through the womb of the captured slave women. Okay, so that's how it was different. At some point, I met this wonderful guy from a group called Christian Solidarity International. His name is John Eibner. He's the hero of this, all of this. And he was working to figure out how to buy back the slaves that the North took from the South. Christian Solidarity International figured out that if they paid certain Arabs who lived near the border, who wanted to cooperate and didn't want to have war with the black South, those guys could go up north and steal or buy or find people like Simon who were there and bring them back. So it turned out to be $35 or $50 per slave. And we raised, and in Europe they raised, but in America we raised tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And we got on TV, and it was really interesting, and kids all over were chipping in. There were nice little stories on NBC or CBS of little kids chipping in money to bring back slaves. And I finally went to South Sudan illegally. We went through Kenya.
Because you cannot go through the Khartoum.
Yeah, you can't go through the north. The north wouldn't let you go. So we went illegally. I went with Christian Solidarity International. We would walk for half a day to a clearing where there's this huge shade tree, and there were hundreds of women and children, slaves that had been returned from the back, and they were waiting for us. And did they really know they were going to be redeemed? It must have been a horrible night for them. They were told they were going to be freed. Why would they believe it? And Eibner came with a duffel bag full of cash, It was the most amazing scene you ever saw. And he sat down next to the retrievers, the Arab retrievers, and he paid and paid and paid, and it was all done. I'm going to get emotional. You know, he stood up and he said through a Dinka, it was mostly Dinka people that were enslaved, and he said to a Dinka translator, you are blessed by God. Don't think about what they made you do. Good people from the West paid for your freedom, and now you are free. And whoa, I experienced that 3 or 4 times in my life, and I just. So when that happens, their families, which were brought nearby, start screaming and jumping and dancing, and I was dancing with them, and it was just the most amazing thing I ever did in my life, except for marrying my wife, which I should say. We saved, CSI saved tens of thousands of people this way, and eventually the word got to George Bush, President Bush, and he forced Khartoum to do a plebiscite to allow the South to vote whether or not they wanted to stay, because that region is mostly black Christian and African Christian in the South. And of course they voted 99.999% to leave, and then that's why we have the newest state nation in the world, the South Sudan. So now the same thing is happening in Nigeria. The same thing is happening in maybe 10 African countries, Mali, Somalia, Burkina Faso, as this ideology that says we can do this expands and gets militant, and nobody wants to pay attention to that. So we have formed the African Jewish Alliance
right, which is you're here to kind of inaugurate this.
Yeah, we're here. Yeah. We're here in Congress. We're talking to Congress, and because what happened to the Jews on October 7th of last year is exactly what I saw when I was in Sudan. The same MO: raiding villages, shooting people, burning them alive, raping and gang raping the girls, and then taking them as slaves. They just, we recently celebrated the return of 4 Israeli hostages. And the girl, Noah, reminds me of the girls that I met when I was in Sudan interviewing survivors of the slave raids. It's the same thing. We went to the slave redemption sites, and we talked to the survivors who were brought back. And they told us their stories. And this beautiful girl was telling me that when the jihadists came to her village and slaughtered people, they lined up the girls. And they grabbed one girl and they wanted to rape her. And she resisted. And they slit her throat in front of the other girls. No one else resisted. They told me that they would chop people's feet off who tried to run away. They told me that they would burn people's huts with people in them. It's hard to listen to that. The one thing they didn't do, which the Hamas did, was the jihadists didn't have GoPro cameras. So now you can actually see what they did to the blacks if you watch what Hamas did to the Jews. We formed this organization. We have Igbos, we have Darfuris, we have South Sudanese, we have Nigerians, we'll get Mauritanians. And these people live in the United States, the ones we're working with. And they're a constituency that is important and powerful. Our goal is to inform decent American people that blacks and Jews are being tortured, murdered, and enslaved based on the same ideology. In other words, Hamas is no different than Boko Haram in Nigeria. It's one front in Israel, but it belongs to a global movement, and people need to know that.
Your organization that you worked with bought tens of thousands of people, for $35 to $50, I think you said. Somehow that really makes it hit home, doesn't it?
The abolitionists in America decided to do the same thing. They bought Frederick Douglass's freedom. So because he was in the North, and he was the biggest voice for abolition in the North, and they were afraid. I mean, he was an escaped slave, and they were afraid that the Southerners would come up and get him. So they purchased his freedom. We're supposed to have been a progressing human culture, and we're supposed to have been beyond this, and yet it was, and it still is, and it's just politically kind of incorrect to point it out when it's not done by Westerners.
So I know a little bit about South Sudan. I've known a number of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom Commissioners, and one of them, Nadine Menza, was telling me that about some significant advancements in South Sudan in this area of religious freedom. At the same time, there's war. And so what is the current reality over there?
When we talk about Southern Sudan, when there is freedoms of the religions, freedoms. In the North, it has a different reality by itself as Islamic states. When he was withdrawn, the country went back to the turmoils where the government of Sudan fighting one another. The capital Sudan, which is Khartoum, is completely as being destroyed. It is a ruthless war where the technical government, which was in power, have to move from the capital to somewhere in eastern country, Port Sudan, to avoid what is happening in Khartoum. So when it comes to the issue of the religion freedoms in the South, yes, there is a freedoms of that, but at the same time, Southern Sudan is not at peace by itself. Southern Sudan is at war by itself to a point that the international community got tired of it. The United Nations is protecting thousands, hundreds of thousands in UN camps in the capital, Juba, afraid from their own government. Citizens of the country are being protected by the United Nations within their own country. That happened in Sudan. In Northern Sudan, things are not going good. In other words, the issue of the religions and freedoms is not really a question. The question is how you survive today and live for tomorrow in those two countries.
It's a tribal society. There are many, many, many tribes. And the tribes had united to fight off the Arab Islamic North. They came together and they defeated a jihad, and they won their own freedom. And as soon as they won their own freedom, the tribes didn't get along, and they're fighting each other. So it's a tragedy.
2 years after independence, we killed from each another 500,000 in 1 year.
Yeah.
And this is in the South alone. And in fact, nobody talk about it to a point. The President of the United States, Obama, I have to go on hunger strike here in Washington for 45 days to force him to go to Ethiopia, because I felt so strongly that Southern Sudan, it is an American baby. You cannot walk away, and you cannot play a role of midwife, deliver a child and walk away from that child. And indeed, when he realized that my life was in danger after 40 days, and that's where he decided he would go to Ethiopia to tell the warrior faction to make peace. And that peace agreement was forged. Even the sitting President Salva Kiir.
It's an unbelievably complex reality.
It is, but slavery continues in Africa, and Americans need to understand what's happening, and that's why we are doing the work that we do. The Nigerian American community came to me and they explained, Charles, we see what's happening in Israel, The same thing is happening to us. Nobody cares about us. We need to work together because it's the same enemy. The same Allah Akbar screams, the same shootings and murders and raping and kidnapping is happening. And so I began with them a while back, and we've added other African groups, and I'm just learning now about how many African countries this is happening in. As I said, there are about 10 that I know of. And I'm just learning about some of these, Burkina Faso, Somalia, Mali, Democratic Republic of Congo, Mozambique. Africa might be the center of Islamist extremism in the world now. I mean, if the whole continent of Africa is taken over by this ideology, and if Africans are forcibly converted to a faith not their own, and if millions of Africans are killed and raped and slaughtered and kidnapped and enslaved, that's a new world. Everybody in the world had slaves. The Chinese, the Romans, the Greeks, the Africans, the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, everybody had slaves. We pride ourselves in the West as being the ones who abolished slavery. We were the ones who abolished slavery. How can we continue if we let this happen? In Sudan, when they did get boys, young boys, when the boys became adolescents, they slit their throats because they didn't want to have them as young males, being dangerous to them.
When we came to this country and trying to tell Americans, and especially elected officials, that we are being targeted by radicals on concepts of ideology because we happen to be Christians. We refuse to be forced into Islamization and Arabizations. People didn't listen to us. In fact, we were told at that time by elected officials that we're being paranoid. You are trying to drag us into your war. Even we were telling them what Osama bin Laden is building in my country at that time, which is Sudan, where Osama bin Laden created Al-Qaeda, which is a center in English, was created not in Afghanistan. It was created in Khartoum, in African country. So we, the people of Southern Sudan, we were subjects to be slaughtered in the name of ideology, together with the Jewish as is the same. What is happening to us, it is exactly what happened in Israel. So for the peoples of the world to be naive of this Islamic radicals ideology of Islam, let people go back and see what happened one time in the continent of Africa. American was fighting with Osama bin Laden while he was, building a base in Somalia, which is Al-Shabaab. He went and attacked American embassy in Kenya and attacks American embassy in Tanzania, in African country. In the eyes of the Muslims, the Arab Muslims, a black person by nature is an abid, a slave.
So the Arab word for black is the same word for slave.
Yeah.
Abid.
Abid. But if that's the case, can we come together and form an alliance and denounce that? That's why the purpose of African Jewish Alliance.
I think you told me that Israel actually played a role in helping the South Sudanese.
It was in the first war, the war of 1955 to 72, when Southern Sudanese was fighting the sitting government in Khartoum with the spear, and nobody was there for them to help them. And it was Israeli Mossad who came and gave them some logistics so that they can defend themselves, knowing that in every country surrounded Sudan at that time, no one were there to help Southern Sudanese. But I know all my people in Southern Sudan, it was in Sudan at that time, but in Southern Sudan, in general, they will never, ever forget the generosity of the State of Israel. When October 7 happened, when everybody running out from Israel, I was rushing in, even to a point that I was asked by a gentleman in the airplanes that, oh, why are you going to Israel when everybody getting out of Israel? And I asked him, then where are you going, sir? He said, but that's my home. I said, but they are my peoples. But I went there to stand with them in solidarity, especially to be with the victims' family, to mourn with them, with those who, their kids, their family perished, and at least even to cry with them, which I did. And I walked from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in solidarity. That's what I received, and especially we have some few Southern Sudanese who happen to be in Israel as refugees. When they knew that I'm coming, I didn't know them, I don't know their name, they come volunteer and walk with me all the way to Jerusalem as in solidarity, as a thank you to what Israel has given us. We would have done more, but we didn't have anything. We are not a government, we are peoples who will never forget the friendships and the goodness and what Israel has done to us.
That's an amazing story. You know, this was done surreptitiously. The Mossad and the IDF went into southern Sudan, and they saw that the black Christian community there was being massacred, and it was done by jihadists. They not only airdropped supplies and guns and machine guns, but they went in and trained the SPLA, the Southern People's...
Not SPLA, Anyanya.
Anyanya, this is before the SPLA. They trained them in how to fight. And I know today that if Israel itself weren't besieged and in very much danger, they would be the first ones to try to go back and do it again to help the Nigerians and the Somalis and the Malis and the Sudanese over again. But it was an amazing event in history. Very little is known about this, but it was true.
And this African Jewish Alliance is connected to that, in my opinion.
So, what do you make of what happened actually recently in LA? What did I actually get you to tell me what you saw happen?
Well, a couple of days ago in Los Angeles, people were going to a synagogue, and hundreds of people in keffiyehs, who knows how many leftists, how many Islamists were there, they attacked them, assaulted them, beat them. So this is America, where Jews are being beaten. The Jews in America thought that this was the golden land. This was the place where people were going to treat us differently than we were treated in Europe, because the LA police did not stop this crowd from beating up Jews. And that is, to us, pretty terrifying. College campuses are a horrific scene for Jewish kids, because all of these so-called progressives, following their teachers, their professors, hate us. Some of us knew it was coming. None of us knew it would be lit on fire with a match, like October 7th. So the Jewish community is in shock, and that's because anti-Semitism is a virus, is a mind virus that morphs, that's shape-shifting. So the pattern is, whatever is the worst sin of any human epoch, that's what the Jews are charged with. So when it was religion, it was deicide, or you didn't follow Muhammad. When race science showed that white people were superior as master races, the Jews were slandered as racial vermin. When nationalism was the only virtuous way where every culture could show and express its inner cultural worth, the Jews were hated because we had no state. We were stateless cosmopolites, rootless cosmopolites. Now, when globalism is the reigning ideology, right? We're hated because we have a state. It's no longer decent to say about Jews what the Nazis said, that we're inferior race, or that we control everything with. So what they do is they said the state of Israel is the biggest sin of our time. So that's the new defamation. This has now been promoted. The college professoriate, which is every research finding will tell you is way on the extreme left. This has been promoted by unfair coverage of the media. You have all of these kids who went to colleges, mostly elite colleges. It's the funny thing. I went to Harvard. I mean, you can't believe what the kids who go to Harvard University think about the Middle East. It's outrageous. And you ask them if they know anything about the enslavement of blacks in Africa by Hamas's cousins, they'll go out of their minds. They won't even listen to it. So there's an alliance between the left and radical Muslims. We call it the Red-Green Alliance. The Jews of Europe are being pushed out by this alliance. The Jews will be gone from France pretty soon, England maybe, etc. So I think that the problem is a certain new way of speaking about the human condition. And this way of speaking has been called woke or progressive or intersectional. Right? And it proposes that there are only two kinds of people in the world, oppressors versus oppressed. And it puts a racial tone on this, and that is that white people are the oppressors for all time, forever, and non-white people are always oppressed. The Jewish people are being defined as white, whereas in the past, the Jews were hated by the Nazis and others because we weren't really white. We were not part of the master race, which is kind of ironic, right? Now, if you see the world in this way, you may never be able to see sin, evil, done to people by non-whites. Okay? And it's that evil that is happening in Africa today against blacks by non-whites and against Jews by some non-whites. I mean, imagine a decent American person who's anti-racist. What in the world would stop him from trying to free blacks slaves today? And it's only this confused ideology of this false binary, because evil runs through every person, good and evil. It's not by race.
The world should not be naive and fall asleep, especially after what the U.S. went through after 9/11. We didn't act and call it as it is when we see the danger is coming to us. Americans thought this is far away from us. Even we came here and told them that these things is going to come, because into the eyes of those people with ideology of Islam, you are the head of infidels. You cannot call yourself the superpower of the world, whereby that you call yourself probably a Christian country, and you are being, exempted from us. We, the people of Southern Sudan, we're being slaughtered because we refuse to surrender. We refuse to convert into Islamizations. So jihad was declared on us. What you don't get here, these things, it is not on us alone, it is on everybody. Those radicals, terrorism, bedded by a sitting country of Iran, which the goal is to Islamize everybody by force. If you don't, you will be subject. Please wake up. And I was counting, there are about 11 terrorist groups in the continent of Africa today being bedded and funded by Iran. I don't know about Asia, and I don't know about here in this country. Are you telling me that Iran is not funding other terrorists in this country? They are. If you live in denial, you will be surprised tomorrow. Something bigger than October 7 can happen somewhere else. Where? I have no idea.
If you're an American and you're for social justice, and you're against racism, you've got to ask yourself, what in the world would stop you from acting against the enslavement of black people just because it wasn't done by whites? How in the world can you call yourself a human rights activist?
Former First Lady Michelle Obama went and put a sign, bring the girl home. And the media just focused on that for one day. And after that, what happened? Did the girl are home? If they are not, where are you, First Lady? Why you just say one word and then turn a blind eye? We need girl home. And we need people home in Israel.
Just remind us of this scenario that Simon, that you're talking about. Okay. Bring the girls home.
Yeah, so when Michelle Obama heard that schools in Nigeria were raided by jihadists and black girls were kidnapped and taken captives and enslaved and made wives of their captives, she was properly astonished and shocked. She made a campaign called #Bring Back Our Girls. And that's how most Americans got to know about what was happening in Nigeria. But then, for some strange reason, she let it go, went silent. She shouldn't have. And we invite her back. We need to bring back all the girls.
Slavery is evils. It's a demonization of a fellow human being by a human being. We all made from the image of God, whether you're being black or you're being white. No human being is entitled to own another fellow human being as a piece of property. That should be denounced by any persons, whether you're being a Chinese, whether you're being an Asian, whether you're being an African, or whether you're being a European, and whether you're being whoever that you are. I know what it means when you are in a place where you cannot say no to anything. It's not good, it's brutal, it's inhumane.
And Charles, a final thought as we finish?
Well, the world figured out that it defeated slavery, but it didn't. And when it defeated slavery, it did so by moral teachings, by persuasion, and by war. The moral people in the world said to themselves, this is worth fighting for. This is worth risking everything for, to stop this human bondage.
Well, Simon Deng, Charles Jacobs, it's such a pleasure to have had you on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.